Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tina, and I am the Capability Building Coordinator for Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up is a part of the Info Exchange Group. Info Exchange is a not-for-profit social enterprise that has delivered technology for social justice for over 25 years. With over 100 staff across Australia and New Zealand, we tackle the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. I'd like to welcome you all to the webinar, Digital Marketing for Nonprofits, Grow Your Audience with Google Ad Grants, which will be presented by Tim Brack from Leafcutter. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type it into the questions box on your webinar panel and I'll be able to assist you through there. If you have any questions during the session, please also type it into the questions box and Tim will answer them in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. Please note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you are on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you shortly after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. We'd appreciate it if you took a few minutes to provide us with some feedback. That's all from me for now. I'll hand it over to Tim to get things started. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks very much for that, Tina. Much appreciated. And thanks everyone for joining today's webinar, so growing your audience with Google Ad Grants. So just a bit of quick background. The challenge that you all have, as kind of not-for-profits in this space is, be it fundraising objectives that you have, be it advocacy objectives or other objectives you have, is that we're not in a time where we all have just increasing budgets and unlimited time to do the kind of activities. So as a digital marketer, quite often I'm focused on what can I leverage in the market to kind of get better results in terms of the time I'm spending and the investment that I'm making. And so that's why we put together today's webinar, just to talk about one tool that you can use, which is Google Ads and specifically Google Ad Grants, to take advantage of that and hopefully add it into your mix of marketing and activities that you're running at the moment. So just a really quick kind of background. So I work with Leafcutter. We're a technology partner for nonprofits and purpose-driven organizations in Australia. Ideally, really what we do is we help organizations succeed online and run smarter. And there's various ways we do that through technology and through campaigns and through data that we help people out with. And myself, I'm the digital marketing lead at Leafcutter. I've worked across a number of different agencies and different industries in Australia, the UK, Cambodia, and Malawi. And so I've been working with organizations with really different objectives throughout that kind of time. So some people who want to fundraise, corporates who are selling things online, people who are doing lead generation and advocacy. So lots of different types of campaigns and different purposes for people out there. But really, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is getting over to Google and getting results out of these campaigns we're running. So Google Ad Grants is this kind of idea of, well, if someone's doing a search, and how can we have those ads? How can we have these kind of positions come up for whatever it is that people are searching for? How can we get this kind of free traffic to our website and hopefully get better results out of the traffic that we're driving? And some of you may have already gone through the process, but for those of you who haven't, the registration process, there are a number of steps to it. And I'll just kind of really briefly summarize this. There's information online that runs through these. We have a checklist as well that I'll mention at the end to kind of help you through this process. But really, the first thing is just check that you're eligible for Google Ad Grants. It's not an open for absolutely every organization. There are a few kind of conditions that they do have for who can qualify for ad grants, and it is part of the Google for Nonprofits program that they do run. The steps we have in Australia is it's not just a straight register with Google and then you're done. You do actually register through Connecting Up and then through TechSoup as well as part of that kind of process. But because you're on this webinar, I assume that most of you have already kind of done this step, so that's okay. We then get a little token. We register with TechSoup as well. We apply for the Google for Nonprofits program. And then the next step is actually where it gets more interesting. It's actually setting up the Google Ads account itself and setting up a campaign in there. And again, there's a few kind of criteria for how that should be set up. And it's not something I think that was important to go into a lot of detail right now, because there are good guides online for how to do this, but it's just a very high level of the process that we have. And then finally, you can apply for Google Ad Grants, which kind of seems like a lot of steps to get through just to get to this kind of final point. But for Google, it's just making sure that we've been kind of validated as an organization, that we're in the nonprofits program, that we have an account set up and ready to go, and our campaigns are loaded and all that kind of stuff checks out. And then they'll come back and say, yep, okay, you can kind of run that kind of campaign through there. Ideally, this can be done within a week. It can obviously take a lot more time, just depending on those kind of approvals. But I have had accounts where I've set up from people from scratch, and it can turn around within that kind of week time frame. So it's not something that has to take an extremely long period of time, if you're wondering about that side. But it can be a bit of a complicated process, so kind of bear with it if you're stuck in there, or if you need help getting through it, just let us know. We're more than happy to help you guys out. But really, we have to get through that in order to get this kind of side, in order to get our ads there, our paid search ads. If when people are doing searches and we do want to show up, then, we do have to kind of jump through those hoops in order to get to this kind of point. Now, just in terms of eligibility, it is a program that is available for, valid charities, income tax exempt organizations, and Google does list those criteria out. We do have to agree to, all of Google's terms and conditions. There are quite a few, but that's so they're covering their end as well to make sure that the program is being used by the organizations that are valid. And then, of course, from a configuration point of view, the ad account itself has to be set up in a particular way. And we do actually have to have conversion tracking. And I'm going to talk about conversion a little bit in this talk. Normally in digital marketing, a lot of people think a conversion is an online sale. And certainly there's lots of blogs that talk about it in that kind of way. For ourselves today, a conversion can mean, online fundraising. It can also mean other actions that people take on your website. So that could be people, filling in a form, signing up to a newsletter. It could kind of be any sort of online action that people can take on your site. We'll talk a bit more about meaningful conversions in a little bit. That's what I do like to focus on. A few people that can't actually register for Google Ad Grants, government entities, organizations, schools, academic institutions, hospital and healthcare. So there are, unfortunately, those types of organizations are excluded from Google Ad Grants. For schools and for education organizations, there is Google. Google does have apps for education, but they don't have the Ad Grants program for that particular sector. All right. So once you've done this, once you've jumped through all these hoops, what do you actually get from Google? Well, it's like 10,000 US a month of in-kind advertising on the Google Search Network specifically. So that's roughly $170,000 a year in ad spend, which is that's kind of a decent budget to work with. I've certainly worked with organizations previously, both not-for-profit and profit, corporate organizations. Some who will easily spend under that, and it can be a decent amount of traffic you can get through that sort of spend to run a successful campaign through. So it's like that's a pretty chunky campaign to kind of work with, which is nice. It's nice that it's not just like 1,000 a month of limited spend, but that's kind of what we're really talking about. So when you're thinking about investing time, because that's really what we're investing in setting this up and in running the campaigns, it's kind of like, well, here's the opportunity you have, here's the parameters for that. So always kind of gauge the time you're investing by, well, what's the potential return on that time, and here's the potential budget that you can work with. All right. So then, well, where are the ads? With Google and search results, and you'll have all kind of seen this whenever you're doing searches, we have the paid ads that often appear at the top of search results. They don't always appear, but quite often they will. And we can have up to 4 ads at the top of search results and another 3 ads at the bottom of search results. And sandwiched between those ads is, of course, the organic, what we would call the organic results. And organic just means, they're not paid, as in they're not doing pay per click, cost per click for those positions in Google search results. And so that's kind of, really that paid side. That's kind of what we're talking about today. How can we get these positions in search? Hopefully at the top of the page, and hopefully driving decent kind of traffic and decent amounts of the right traffic that we want for whatever kind of mission that we're driving or whatever objectives we have with our website, that's kind of what we're aiming to drive traffic for. All right. I work a lot with search campaigns, and one thing I really like about search itself is that it's what we call a high intent channel in marketing and in digital marketing. And it's high intent just means that, well, people are actually looking for the problem. They're searching for the thing, and you're saying, oh, here's the thing that exists on my website. So come to my website because we can answer that question, or we have information about whatever it is you're looking for. So the quality of the traffic is higher, and the probability that traffic will do what you want them to do is higher as well than other channels we might use, such as, say, banner advertising, display, or even social. No one goes to Facebook to look at the ads. Sometimes I do, but that's because I'm in digital marketing. But I'm sure a lot of you're not there for the ads, and no one really is there for the ads. So those sorts of channels, those channels where you do awareness campaigns, that's a very different type of message that you'll do. It's a very different type of campaign that you would run compared to a search campaign, where it's much closer to a decision point that someone might be making, or you actually know, okay, well, here's the information or cause they're actually interested in, so let's give them that information and let's do it straight away, because we don't need to we don't need to be coy with our messaging, or we don't need to get an audience interested in what we have to talk about first. All right. So one of the really big things to keep in mind with search, and particularly with Google, is what we talk about with search intent. And search intent just means it's coming back to what Google is trying to do every time we do a search. So Google's kind of purpose for operating, apart from occasionally making a lot of money, but the purpose for operating is really to give us the best answer and to give us the best source for that answer. So relevancy and authority. And relevancy and authority are really why, that's kind of at the core of how Google operates, and how, they have such a big market share in Australia in particular. It's like 95% of the search market in Australia, less in other countries, but here it's quite large. And, the reason why they are the search engine of choice is because they really focused on this for a long time. They weren't the first search engine. If you go back to the darker days of the internet, when there's like Ask Jeeves and AltaVista and Lycos, and then Google comes out, and they really focused on relevancy, a fast experience, and giving people like a really great answer to whatever the question was or the information they're searching for. Those concepts and that kind of user experience still plays out with paid advertising. You can't advertise and be completely irrelevant for the search intent, whatever someone's looking for, because that would erode the user experience. And from Google's point of view, they'd be concerned that people would stop using Google, which I don't know. There are alternatives. They're just not widely used. So keep in mind, in particular, the relevancy for what people are searching for, what the ad they see is, and what the content you have on your website is. So whatever they're searching for, financial help if you have cancer, what the ad is about, and then the landing page they're going to as well. There should be this clear flow of relevancy between those points. This is quite often where I see a few people kind of stumble with their campaigns. It might be that they're just driving traffic to a homepage when people are searching for actually quite specific topics, and it's not going to get great results, because people are very clear, like, here's the intent behind my search, so there should be a match with the ad itself and then the landing page or the page that they land on your website. And this is where the time factor comes in. It does take time to build out campaigns, to create new ads, to create content on your website or make that content better. There's definitely a time element to that. That's okay. We can work within that criteria, and we can improve the content over time. You don't have to be perfect on day one, but that's ideally what we should look for. It's what our audiences are looking for, and it's also critically kind of what Google's looking for as well when it's evaluating good campaigns and ones that don't really perform. In terms of search intent, there's really kind of three aspects to it. So good use of search ads is where these kind of things intersect, and it's about the problems that people have. So the personas and your audiences, whatever is kind of top of mind for them, if they're searching for a cause, if there's something else they're kind of looking for, information they're looking for, there's content you have on your website as well. If you don't have the content on your website, you can't really rank for it, and you can't really advertise on it with Google Ads because you're not relevant for that search anymore. And then there's also linking back to what you do as an organization. So if you're talking just about content marketing, that's about the problems people have in your content. And then I'm always trying to be like, well, what is the objective? Like, what are we trying to get people to do on our website? Be it those big objectives we might have, like fundraising or advocacy for us, or even kind of small things. Like it could just be that you want people to be aware of an issue or to sign up for a newsletter. And again, that's kind of okay if you need to kind of build out that database. But in that case, on your landing pages, they better be able to do those actions. Because if people can't do those actions, then you're driving traffic that can't do the thing you would ideally like them to do. So it's this kind of these three different elements that really work together with running successful Google Ads campaigns. All right. So if you're working internally on paid search and also working with agencies, normally paid search and a lot of the documentation and the blogs and the videos out there, they really focus on profitable return on the ad spend. And that's kind of what it should normally focus on. For us, it's a little bit different because perhaps the action you're driving, it's not about profit. It's not about profitable return. It's about like the best return you can get, but there isn't this kind of profit motive behind it. And so I definitely know that some agencies and even some people who work with Google Ads for a long time, it can flip how we use Google Ads and how we optimize it. It can flip it on its head, because if we're only really optimizing for a profit, but with ad grants, we don't have the same cost involved. So we can actually drive actions that aren't just about profit, but there might be other actions on the website we want people to take. And it's totally fine to have that kind of perspective, but it might just mean you need to help coach people internally, or if you're using an agency, help coach them on just how to focus on what you want them to do. And that's when we'll talk about conversions and meaningful conversions in a little bit. So things we can then do with Google Ad grants is, if it's not just about strictly about fundraising, it could be about information or awareness that you might, as an organization, that you might have on your website. It could be, if it's health-related information that you provide to people as part of your mission, as part of your service. It could be other calls to action, such as if you want people to be involved or do advocacy actions on your behalf. Those can also be calls to action in the ads themselves. And then hopefully leading the people to the page where they can take that action rather than just, to a homepage or a generic page. You can also test messaging, which I always find to be really a great thing to do, and should be just part of how I would normally build a Google Ads campaign, where I'm testing different messaging and different types of keywords based on what are people searching for, and I might come up with a few varieties of how I think I should message, message that particular action I want people to take. And that's easy to do in Google Ads. It's as simple as creating a few different ad varieties. Google will automatically optimize whichever ad performs the best. It will show that more frequently. So it'll kind of take care of that delivery of the best ad for you. But then you can get some kind of insight to what messaging works really well when people are searching for these types of things, and what messaging do people not really click on. And then when they do land on your website, what messaging had worked even better? If they click on a particular ad, do they then take the action on your website? And with the reporting, we can see down to that kind of granular detail of this ad particular led to this many clicks, led to this many actions on your website that people took. So we can see that full flow of what's going on. The key behind it, though, is the intent. So the intent behind the search. And we always have to think is the audience going to be receptive to the ad itself? And then critically to the content that's on your website. So it might be that, someone's doing, again, a health-related search. We work with a bunch of organizations that have health-related information or do fundraising around different health kind of topics. And, if you are doing, if you have content around, say, leukemia with children, or fundraising and research you do around a particular kind of illness, the page that people land on the website, it better kind of have good information on it. It can't really be just thin content, 100 or so words that kind of broadly discuss kind of what you do, because people aren't looking for broad information that doesn't really answer the questions they have. When they do a search, they're looking for, hopefully quality information, something that answers their question. So the landing pages or the pages that we send people to, how rich the content on your website is, these are really important factors for a successful use of Google Ads. So just an example where the intent didn't quite match was a search for domestic violence support, and the first ad that was there was a fundraising ad, which isn't relevant to the search itself. And again, I know how that can kind of appear in the search results. It could have just been that this was an ad that applied across a lot of different campaigns. The ads that appeared out after this, and also all the organic results that appeared out after this one, were actually about support for domestic violence. So they were kind of much more relevant. But sometimes you can have really weird experiences in search where something appears and it's like, oh wait, that's not really the intent behind the search. And we have to be aware of that as not-for-profits when we are using Google Ads, because we don't want a fundraising ad to appear when actually, there's another objective we have online, and that's like our core mission. And in this case, would be helping people and supporting them. And that's back to mission. So we can't have these conflicting website objectives kind of come up when, in this case, the other objective of supporting people would be a more appropriate ad to show in this circumstance. So we can see that in our reporting. We'd be able to kind of pick that up. But again, every now and again, we just need to kind of sense check the campaigns we're running, the types of searches that people are doing, and then what ads do we actually have appearing, what pages are we driving to on our website. So this kind of leads on to the next part, which is really, really important, which is success. What does success mean? And again, for organizations that are trying to drive sales and leads off their website, if it's a company, for them, it's kind of a bit more clear. It's about, well, I need sales and I need leads. So it's easy to optimize around those objectives. For us, it can be a little bit harder, because what if I'm not trying to drive, if I'm not necessarily fundraising, or I'm not trying to develop a lead, then success, and the question of success it can be a little bit more ambiguous or a little bit more gray. But it is still a very important question to answer while we're trying to set up our campaign. So just kind of answering that question of like, what does success look like? Like, you're going to drive this traffic to the website. What should that traffic be doing? What's the objective that you want to drive that traffic to? And it can be, an advocacy action. It can be reading an article. It can be even just coming back to the website or signing up for a newsletter. Whatever it is, there should be some sort of online objective that we're trying to drive. And quite often when I'm working with not-for-profits and working with metrics and these questions of numbers that we're looking at, there can really often be this gap between here's our mission and our vision and what we're trying to do at this kind of high level. And then, well, how do we translate that into website objectives and numbers that we can measure relatively easy? Quite often that can be a hard one to bridge, especially around advocacy. Like, if you want people to take an action which is not on your website, that can actually be a really big, that can be a challenge. So again, happy to answer those questions. If you feel free to email us if you want to talk further about that. It's really tempting to say that success is just spending the money, spend that grant. And it can be a bit of a trap to fall into because you might then optimize traffic that's not great, that's not really doing anything meaningful on your website. And then you're kind of missing out on people who would be more involved or be more aligned with your mission or what you're trying to do. So in terms of that spend, in terms of maxing out the ad spend, just focusing on traffic volume it is a little bit of a tricky one. I of course want to balance. I'm like, I want to get as much traffic as I can, but it should be relevant traffic. It should be the traffic that we want to drive to the website. The maximum spend we do have is that I said 10,000 US a month, which is $329 on a daily basis. It's not going to be focused on quality or conversions, really, if it's just about maxing out that spend. And again, you might miss out on people who are more relevant by focusing just on volume. The other part of it is it's actually Google's making it a lot harder to easily max out the spend. So they even did some changes in April where new AdGrants clients, you can't choose some of the options anymore that other clients or that older accounts could or that paid accounts can. So Google itself is also trying to shift AdGrants a little bit to be where we have to focus more on meaningful conversions on the website, not just volume of traffic as success in inverted commas. It's tempting to also say that the goal of my AdGrants is just to get more donations. I'd say it's tempting to do. I would love to be able to do that and just drive for that objective, but what people don't really do is they don't just search for who can I donate my money to and then click on the first result and then donate their money. That's not how people think, and it's not really how they would go about, donating to an organization in the vast majority of cases. They want to be aware of and know and be involved and have that sense of connection to your cause and your organization. So it's not just a case that people are blindly searching for just like, let me offload my money. Although, people still appear for that search. So I'll definitely admit that a lot of people still bid on those kind of keywords. And that's okay. But again, I don't really have visibility to those results. But for me, it's more about, those meaningful conversions on the website, hopefully getting people through other means that eventually can become fundraisers, can become, peer-to-peer fundraisers as well, and help with those objectives if that's what you're trying to do. So really the focus then is on meaningful conversion. And this is where I will talk to organizations and I'll say, okay, let's go back to what it is we're trying to do as an organization and your mission. And then how does your online presence, how does your digital presence support that? And then what are some conversions we can come up with on a website that can then be linked to Google Ads? And that can be, if people look at certain information on your website, if they're fully informed, and again, if it's around like petitions or advocacy or being involved in inquiries, whatever it is, how are they kind of getting involved in your mission? That's where I'm trying to track some of those conversions that happen online, and then I can connect them back to Google Ads, and then I have meaningful conversions that I'm measuring. So that way I know when I'm looking at like, hey, is this keyword better or is this other keyword better? Well, I know how much traffic they're each driving, but then I know how many conversions they're each driving. And for me, I'm like, okay, well, volume is okay, but really I'm trying to do this other thing. The website is not just about getting people to the website. It's trying to do some sort of other action there. And again, I totally understand that for some of you, you will want just the most number of people to see a website as possible, and that's totally okay. And then for others, you'll be trying to drive a very particular action you want people to do. And again, that's totally okay. And hopefully we can get meaningful conversions, whatever that means for you in your context. We can do engagement conversions as well. Google has the ability to do this, and it's what's called a SMART goal. So if you use Google Analytics, highly recommend. If you don't, Google Analytics and Google Ads work quite well together. They can pass a little bit of data back and forth, and it does make life a little bit easier if you are using Google Analytics. And in Google Analytics, Google set up what's called a SMART goal, which is just a goal based on engagement, where they look at a bunch of different factors. They'll look at how long people on the site, how many pages they're looking at, the type of device they're using. They don't actually say exactly what they look at. They've just said that that's a few things they do look at. And then we can use that as a rough engagement metric on your website. So we don't have to rely on just one number like time or pages, because Google has a conversion that can look at those all together. All right. So with the search campaigns we have, and if you're working on these search campaigns or your staff is, or you have an agency, really there's only three levers that you can pull. Three levers. So there's only really three things that you can change. And they are how we target people, what people see, and how much we're willing to pay for the ads. So how we're targeting people, the core thing that we're really working with in Google Ads is keywords. So things like the keywords that we choose. So when someone does a search, it matches to our keyword, they see the ad. So that's the core targeting we have. That's all about the search intent. We also have negative keywords. So a negative keyword is where we stop our ad being shown. And that's where we might have a bit of overlap between the search intent for one word, and then it changes if they add another word. So example might be if someone does a search and they include the word job, and if you're not looking to recruit, or this search for you is not really about jobs, You put in a negative keyword with the word jobs, and it stops your ad from being shown. Location targeting as well, so we can geo-target around Australia or particular states. We can target cities and even regions in cities. Generally, I find the more specific you get, so if you try to go down to a postcode level, it's not super great, like the targeting kind of falls apart a little bit. But generally city and region, and of course, state and the country if you need. But we do have to put in location targeting when we're doing it. Google Ads does collect limited demographic information, so age and gender. And some of that is just inferred and some of it is explicit. So if you've signed up for Gmail, you've had to put in your date of birth and your gender. And so Google will collect that information and connect it back to the Google Ads system. Not for everyone. So this normally works with about half of traffic that I see. So where this is particularly relevant, you might decide to stop your ads being shown for particular demographics. If they're not in the type of audience that you help, or they're not your core audience, then you could limit your ads from being shown to certain people. That would only really be relevant if you are getting close to hitting the cap, hitting your ad spend cap. Then you might come in here and start to do some playing around with targeting to then go out to more of the audience that you want. Device type as well, so you can target mobile, desktop or tablet devices, and again start playing around there and seeing what kind of happens. Okay, so number one, how we target people. Number two, the ads, what people see when they do their search. That's the kind of creative aspect. That's the messaging. That's about the content that you have mapped back to the personas and their needs. So the ad and ad extensions. I've got a few examples of those in a minute for what we can kind of play with. The third is the bid. And this is kind of what we have almost a little bit less control of now because it is ad grants. So there is a cap on the bid we can pay, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is about the bid strategy. So Google Ads and where you appear in the ad results, it's about how relevant you are and how much you're willing to pay. And that's how Google kind of works out a ranking for who's in position 1, who's in position 2, and further down the page. And it's not just about how much we're willing to pay, it's how much we're willing to pay and also how relevant we are for the search. If it was just about how much we're willing to pay, only big companies could get success out of Google Ads. But they know that to make this a better system, to make sure that the user experience is much better, there has to be a second component, and that's about the relevancy. And that in the Google system is called quality score. That's how they're figuring out this out. So how much we're willing to pay is the kind of third component that we really have for paid search. Of course, you can have a perfect campaign set up in Google Ads, but we are driving traffic to parts of our website. So the content and landing pages are actually really, really important as well. What's that experience like? Do you have a really slow website? Is the content just giant paragraphs of text that are actually really hard to scan? Google does look at these factors as well. It looks to see, is the content on the landing page relevant to the search keyword and to the ad itself? And if it's not, it's going to kind of affect your ability to show up in these search results. Speed is a factor too. If your website is really slow on mobile, Google might not show your ads because they know that speed on mobile is a more important factor than it is necessarily on desktop. So all these kind of components together are part of the user experience. Therefore, it's part of what we need to take care of with our paid search campaign. All right. So I'll just kind of go a little bit on each of those kind of components. So the keywords themselves. Search is about personas and the problems that people are trying to solve. So they're looking for something, like here's my answer to that question, here's my information about that cause, here's whatever it is. And so we really need to understand what our target audience are searching for, how they might start searching about something, what behavior they're kind of going through. Quite often I find that people haven't really understood their market first and done research around how people might search for things. And then start using Google Ads. You can use Google Ads to kind of help you inform that, and you can kind of have a broader campaign that picks up a lot more traffic and then optimize from there. But really, we have to understand our audiences and what it is they're looking for, how they might search. I've had instances previously where how a particular service, so the one I was working with was home care, so particularly aged care and disability support, how those organizations like to refer to themselves internally was different to how the target audience was referring to them. And particularly sensitivities around, use of the word aged and care. and those words. And so, we have to make sure that the way we're going to phrase it matches what our actual audience, the terms they're going to use, not just the terms we're going to use. Otherwise, the intent, we can't really do a match, and Google won't be able to help us out. So the people are really, really important. The keywords that we put into Google Ads, that's about how we're matching the ad and the search intent. So whatever someone actually searches for, which is called the search term itself. So the words that people type in, that's the search term. And then we've got the keywords we load into the system itself. So keywords and search term. The ways that we can get our keywords into the system, Google allows us a little bit of flexibility with, well, how specifically do you really mean that keyword? Or do you mean exactly that keyword? Now, what you probably have in mind is what we would call, with Google Ads, is what we would call a phrase match, where if someone searches for, cancer financial assistance, you want that as a phrase that is in their search. And maybe there's a word before it, maybe there's words after it, but cancer financial assistance is the search term. For Google, if you're putting that into Google, that would be a phrase match. We put that in inverted commas. Google has an even broader option, which is the broad match, where Google will return just a whole bunch of traffic that may or may not be relevant to the search intent that you have in mind. And that's where, for a lot of campaigns or a lot of accounts, where if we're actually spending money, this is the danger for Google Ads. We can burn a lot of our budgets with broad match keywords, and so we're actually going to be a little bit more precise by using phrase match, sometimes exact match as well. But that's how we always have to kind of be aware of that. So an example of where broad match just returns too much traffic is, I had a client I helped out a while ago, and I just kind of loved the example. And they were doing a social enterprise in Southeast Asia, running bicycle tours in Southeast Asia. And the keywords that we had in the system were things like cycling in Vietnam, bicycle tours, Vietnam bicycle tours. So the intent for me was like, okay, yeah, that's pretty clear in my mind what people might be searching for. And the actual search terms that Google would match would be like biking in Belize, or Vietnam motorcycle for sale, or motorbike hire Canada. So in terms of intent, like they are completely different from what I had in mind. And so that's just the danger with broad match. It can match, as the name suggests, really, really broadly, and not be precise enough for what you want to drive to your website. So it's quite a problem when, if we're getting traffic, if you are hitting that kind of cap, that can be a little bit problematic. So we just kind of need to be aware that that's happening. The other kind of thing is you don't really want to bid too broadly. If it's going to lead to a negative user experience, that's going to be kind of frustrating. If people come to your website, they're expecting something in their mind, and it's not what they're looking for. They're going to hit that back button, go straight back to Google, click on whatever the next result is, and then go off to a website which is actually about what they want. Now, you might be thinking like, well, is that so bad? One of the problems with our account or with our campaigns when that does happen is, if Google sees the user going to a page and then coming back to Google, going to a different result, it's going to be like, well, okay, they're not actually really relevant for this keyword. So it's going to actually impact our quality score and our relevancy. So we don't really want to run too many broad campaigns where people are just bouncing off our website pretty quickly, going straight back to the search result, going to another page, because it is going to impact the overall kind of quality rating of the keywords we're trying to bid on, which can kind of hurt us a little bit in the long run. One of the best reports I love in Google Ads is called the Search Terms Report. And this is where you can see a side-by-side comparison of what was the keyword I put in the system versus what did people actually type into Google. So here, I've got the keyword I had, cycling in Vietnam, the actual search term, biking in Belize. I'm checking that report on a weekly basis. And so depending on how much volume you have going through your account, you can adjust that time frame. But I'm checking that report on a weekly basis to see, are there any new negative terms that I should be adding to my campaign? Because people are showing up in search, they're clicking on my ads when really it's not the intent. The intent behind their search didn't match my keyword. I'm also checking it for, maybe there are new ad groups, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but maybe there are new ads I should be showing for new searches that I hadn't thought of previously. So it's one of the reports we can see in Google Ads. And so here's an example for music therapy. So that the second column is the keyword and the first column is the actual search term. So that's why I had that example of jobs. So in that second row there, we have music therapist jobs Australia. And that would be like, okay, if I'm not offering jobs, then a negative keyword I can add is jobs itself, and then I won't appear for that search. Down the bottom of the list, there's disability and music for autism. So that could be where I'm like, okay, I have a music therapy service, and if I haven't actually broken out a specific messaging around disability, people with disability, then actually I could now expand my campaigns, expand my keywords. And so then I could be like, okay, well, let's have some keywords specifically targeting music therapy and disability. And then the ad itself also targets that search. So it doesn't have to be a generic music therapy ad. It can now be specific to what someone's looking for. So again, this kind of search terms report is a great report for just checking the search intent and trying to figure out the search intent sometimes, but checking the search intent and the keywords that you have in your account. All right, so that was the kind of first thing, keywords. The second thing is the ads and ad extension. So with the ads themselves, I can't give exact guidance for everyone, like here's exactly what you need in your ad, because it changes depending on what we're all doing. But this is kind of where the craft of Google Ads comes in, because this is all now about messaging, content. It's about, again, personas, the problems they have, the information they're looking for. What I can outline is just like the criteria, like what we kind of have to fit in, what space do we have to play with. So we have up to 3 headlines, 30 characters each. The first 2 headlines will be shown. Sometimes the third headline is shown, not always. So don't put a critical message in that third headline. We have the URL itself. So we can make the URL not just the website. So marineconservation.org.au/. We can add in a little bit to the end if we want. It's not compulsory. And then we have description as well. So this is the kind of the bulk of the ad that comes underneath the URL. The part about the description is that you can see there certain words are in bold, and that's kind of matching back to whatever I'd searched for. So that's a good way of just, again, making sure your description is relevant to the search, rather than just having a generic description, which is the same across every single ad in the account. That wouldn't really make sense. I have had the question, is all that content necessary? Like, do I need to put in all that content? Like, can I just, put in one ad and then it's fine? The benefits are that you can test your different messaging. So you can see, like, well, what are people responding to? You care about the cause or the purpose or whatever action you're trying to drive. And at least this way you can test like different ways of messaging that with people to get some feedback of what is more successful or not. Using all those different content features can improve your rankings as well. It's a relevancy sign to Google. So that's why I always encourage, taking a little bit of extra time and putting them in. And the other kind of part is increasing the click-through rate. So if you do have, that third headline and it does appear, it can mean that people are more likely to click through to the ad. And so that's why it's a good thing to just kind of, again, use those features and kind of get better results. Ad extensions are ways that our ads can take up more physical space in the search results. And so Google does have a bunch of different extensions available. One is called callouts, where it's like little I think it's like 25 character messages, very, very short, where it's almost like unique points about your organization or about your mission or whatever it is you kind of do. So extra messages you can include. Phone numbers can be part of the ad itself as well. So if that's part of what, if you're trying to drive those calls, then you can have that as part of the ad. On mobile, that becomes click to call. So obviously a little bit more useful on mobile, but can display on desktop as well. Additional site links is quite often one that I like to use, where maybe there's multiple pages that are relevant for a particular search, in which case I can put in additional links as part of the ad. So maybe they don't go to the primary ad, the primary link, but they go to one of these other ones, and that's how we can drive extra traffic. Sometimes they'll appear as just that little row of links. Sometimes they'll appear as 2 big links under your primary one. We don't control when Google does one or the other. It's just the system is just optimizing for whatever gets better results. You'll also see address in some of them. So again, if you want to drive people to a location, that is totally possible, or a bunch of locations. And if you have multiple locations, Google will be choosing whatever it thinks is closest to where the person who is searching is. So it will optimize that for you. There's a couple more that we can include. A structured snippet, which is if you have a type of structured information on your website, or typically I'm using the services structure there, so just a list of services that we provide. And when we actually set up our account, we actually do have to use the call out and the site link. You don't have to set up the other ones, but those two are required for setting up a Google Ads account with AdGrants. So you will actually have to go through those steps. All right, so the third lever is the bid strategy. And this is where we can play around with how much we're going to pay per click. So with Google Ads, like you're probably thinking, oh yeah, I choose how much I pay. So that's what we call a manual cost per click, manual bid strategy. And that's no doubt, if you've used Google Ads previously, that's probably what you have experience with. There are also automated bid strategies. And that's where Google decides how much you pay, which is kind of a really weird thing to think about. Of like, oh wait, Google's telling me how much I'm going to pay to Google, and they're kind of in control of that entire system. So yeah, especially if you're spending money on campaigns, like real money, not grant money, that feels like an odd thing to do. But it is definitely something that Google's driving a lot more of. And of course they are. There's like a good incentive to it. But anyway, they have a number of different automated strategies that we can choose from. So new AdGrants accounts, unfortunately, new accounts is actually a lot more limited in what you can choose. You do have to choose an automated strategy, which is a bit problematic. But there are kind of ways where we can just optimize this for the best results on the website. But again, it's still thinking about what is a meaningful conversion for you. What can people do on your website, and you want to get them to do that thing? So, bit of a weird thing to think about. So with letting the robots decide, really the main ones we would use normally: maximize clicks, target cost per acquisition, cost per conversion, and maximize conversion. So with these kind of ones, maximize. So when we're choosing these automated strategies, it's about 4 or 5 other ones that we can choose as well. This is saying like, okay, Google, you decide how much I'm paying per click here, but my objective is maximize my clicks, or give me conversions at a certain cost. So maybe it's like don't pay more than $40 for a new fundraiser, or $40 for a new advocacy filled in form. And then the third one is just get as many types of conversions as possible, not really, regardless of how much it's kind of costing. So it's kind of like if you've used Facebook campaigns, it's kind of similar to how Facebook will operate, which is you choose an objective for your campaign, and that objective could be driving traffic to your website, or doing another action on Facebook itself. And on Facebook, if you choose like, oh yeah, traffic to my website, Facebook will show the ads to people who are more likely to click an ad, because that's what the objective is. So here, Google is trying to assess like, okay, are people likely to click the ads? Are they likely to convert? Is the second one there. And if you think about conversions, well, Google needs data. It needs data to optimize around that sort of objective. So when we're setting up a conversions, we can't have like 3 conversions a month, because if we only have 3, it's not enough data for Google to really work out an effective bid strategy around. Ideally, we'd have a minimum of 30. The more that happens, the better. And again, we can kind of define what a conversion means. So it doesn't have to be like, oh, it's only if someone donates to your organization. You can have other objectives as well. And I would recommend having multiple objectives in the system too. So the bid strategy is really that third piece that we would choose. We're a bit kind of limited with Google Ads and AdGrants now in what we can, the options we can actually use. So with the landing pages, this kind of fourth kind of element, the website, super important, because that's where we're driving all the traffic, right? So this is what we want people to come and do the thing we want them to do. Your content is also a very important part of Google Ads. It can't be that you're only running an ads campaign and ignoring the content on your website. It has to be optimized, because if people go to that site, they scan it within a second or like a couple seconds. If it's not what they're looking for, they're clicking the back button and going straight back to Google. So then we've missed that opportunity to do whatever we wanted. That's why this kind of balance of elements of relevancy, of content, of the problems that people have, and what we're trying to get them to do when they come to our website. So your content landing pages, ideally they should be relevant. Not just relevant, but is it a good content experience? So, have we broken up if it's just blocks of text, can we break it up? Can we put in headings and all these kind of other things that people have been talking about for a while with content and user experience? Make it easy to scan. Turn really short content, 100 words, into longer content that's actually more useful for people, so they don't need to get the information somewhere else. And then ideally, can people do the thing you want them to do? So I've worked with a couple of people at the moment where I'm telling them, okay, we need to optimize the content on the website. We're driving people to content pages inside the website, not to the homepage. If you want them to sign up to the newsletter, donate, get involved, become, join in terms of advocacy objectives, then they should be able to do that on that page. Or it should be a clear call to action on that page where they can then go do that thing. If they can't do the thing, then we've kind of missed an opportunity to help with those objectives. Of course, fast, mobile responsive, well-designed, all these kind of other things that are still factors, which hopefully, is part of your overall website strategy. But those, definitely the speed is a factor for search, because Google doesn't want to drive traffic to websites that are really slow and it's a negative user experience. All right. So kind of onto the kind of reporting side. I've only got a couple more topics to talk about at the moment. So with reporting and measurement, so we have to kind of figure out that success point first. So what is it that we're trying to do? What does success look like for us? And once we have that, once we know what we're trying to do, now we're trying to match up. Well, what are the goals? Like, what are the online? What can people do? And then that's what we're taking back into Google Ads, and we're measuring our performance on. If you've logged into Google Ads and you've played around with it, even Google Analytics, there is just a sea, and you're going to get drowned in metrics very, very quickly. It can be a bit overwhelming in that interface, and you're not alone in that. New to any system, it can be a bit overwhelming. So don't kind of worry about that too much right now. The main metrics that a lot of people kind of look at are things like how many clicks were there, how many impressions were there. An impression is just that the ad loaded on the page. So, how many clicks were there? Really, how many times did the ad load, so impressions? From those two numbers, we get our click-through rate. And click-through rate is just like, well, how effective was this ad at matching the search intent, really, of the keyword? We then have our cost and our cost per click. So the cost is the total cost that we've kind of spent across all those clicks. The cost per click is on average how much we're spending click by click, kind of going there. Now, these numbers are shown all through Google Ads. So if you're looking at the account level, the campaign level, the ad group level, it's there. It's always there. What's missing in those numbers is the outcome. What happened? So yeah, sure, we got clicks, but what did they do after they got to the website? So that's kind of where we're talking now about those conversions. Whatever those meaningful conversions are, the conversion rate, which is how efficient was this traffic at doing the thing we wanted them to do. You can also get cost per conversion, which can be good to kind of look at. I tend to focus more on the conversion rate for my efficiency metric there. But it's really important to just kind of consider these two different groups of metrics. The first one is very tactical. How is this campaign running? How is this keyword running? How is this ad running? I've got my click rate, my cost per click, but if I'm trying to drive particular outcomes on the website, that's going to be more relevant about conversion. You might have a keyword or an ad that drives a lot of volume, but it doesn't drive conversion. And so you're going to have to make that balanced decision. Like, well, is it just about the traffic, or is it about the outcome that I'm trying to drive there? And so some of you, maybe kind of both. Some of you will skew more towards, well, the conversion is the most important thing. I don't just want general traffic coming to my website. And others that will be like, yeah, I need to go out to everyone, because that's part of what I need to do. So we need to kind of make sure we're looking at those and then kind of balance between them. The way that metrics are reported in Google Ads is it's at excruciating detail at times. So we can see all these numbers at the account, like a big overarching level. We can see it campaign by campaign, ad group by ad group, ad and keyword by keyword. So you can keep drilling into this information and see all these metrics all over again, just recorded at different kind of levels. So there's going to be a way that kind of we do have all those numbers at all those different levels. I mentioned the search terms report. This is kind of like a little bit of how to get there, because that was like my favorite report, apart from just the campaign overview of what I'm always kind of checking on a frequent basis. I will just kind of finish up with one thing about compliance, which don't fall asleep. It's still like a really important thing to note, and that's with Google Ads compliance. So they do have criteria that you have to maintain in your account to keep your account active. If you don't maintain this criteria, Google will deactivate your account. And then you have to go through, you have to kind of do some fixes and then reapply to have it reinstated, which is just a bit of a headache, especially if you rely on that traffic. So you do need, on average, 5% click-through rate over a 2-month period. So if your click-through rate falls below that, they'll notify you. You need to kind of stop the keywords that are getting impressions but no clicks. Google won't let us use really generic keywords or a lot of single word keywords as well. So they're really concerned about quality of the traffic, relevancy there. So they make sure that the keywords we put into the system are relevant. You have to track conversions. That's part of the compliance. Google has an annual survey where they just ask us our feelings and how we're using Google Ads and the ad grants specifically, the program. We have to have a purpose and mission that's actually listed on the website. So there are criteria around purpose and mission. It's not just a program that's available for everyone. We have to actually log into the account and remain active and kind of make changes every now and again. Google needs to see that we're actually using it. And that meaningful conversion there is definitely a piece. When I spoke about cost per click and bid strategy, so now new accounts, you can't do a manual bid strategy. Previous accounts, old accounts, if you're doing manual bidding, you have a $2 limit for your bid, for the bid strategy if it's manual. Automated bidding can go above the $2 limit. So that's an important kind of thing to know. That's a reason to use automated bidding because it can go above that $2 cap that we have in the account. All right. If you have any compliance problems, Google will send out the email. It kind of looks like this. You click on the link, it goes to a weird little page that tells you what you're compliant against, what's not compliant. You can then kind of fix the changes and then hopefully it doesn't get deactivated after that. So it's really kind of wrapping up some of the services that we offer is Leafcutter. So we kind of try to help organizations a number of different ways. We can help with setup and configuration. So when we're tracking conversions and we're doing things on the website, we help with that. We do auditing, ad grants, and analytics, kind of all the Google tools really. We can help with looking at that. For some of our clients, we do ongoing management and we'll keep the account compliant where we can. And so we will manage people's campaigns on a day-to-day basis. For other clients, we'll do coaching and we'll help them review the performance. But if people want to control everything internally or train up teams internally, we also do that. So we're happy to work with people and different organizations however they need it. But if you do have questions after the presentation, I know we're going to answer a couple now. Feel free to reach out to us. There's also a checklist as well that please email us and we'll send you through a copy of that checklist. I think we'll switch over to some questions now. So yeah, one sec.
Hi, Tim. We've had a lot of questions come through, so I'll hand it over to MJ to get things started with the questions. If you could just unmute yourself, MJ, and just read them out, Tim will be able to answer them.
Okay. Oh, great. Yeah, I'm on time with that. First question is, my biggest problem with Google Ad Grants is I had it working, then I changed it, and then they stopped the ads. I couldn't work out how to get them started again.
Okay, so yeah, that's quite often a kind of problem. Like with these compliance issues that come up, they will send out, they should be sending out those emails where they're kind of outlining the problem. There are also, and just kind of what area it falls into. I have noticed a couple of times where the advice, where they're kind of saying how to fix the problem, particularly around single word keywords. So one example I had was a client we worked with. Someone had added the keyword NDIS into the list of keywords. Now that's a single word keyword, so it kind of got flagged up in Google systems. Some of the advice they have online is, you can pause or remove the keyword to then get back into compliance. But actually you have to remove it. You can't pause it. If you pause it, it still flags it as not meeting compliance in the system. So the kind of one with that, there's depending on the specific problem, and feel free to email us what the kind of problem was. I'd be able to provide more specific advice. But normally they are saying, like, if the problem is that your keywords dropped in quality, pause those keywords and kind of go. If the click-through rate kind of drops, you can pause some keywords that were leading to the click-through rate kind of going down, and then let them know you've kind of made that change. One of the hardest problems with Google Ad Grants is the support you get from Google is the phone number, which some of you may have experienced. Sometimes it can be okay. Sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating. And the support team at Google is the team that covers everything. So they cover all the paid accounts, and they will answer questions for Google Ads, for ad grants. But the ad grants team is like literally 5 people. And so anything that needs to be escalated to that team of 5 people that is covering the world and the hundreds of thousands of ad grants accounts can take weeks and weeks and weeks to get resolution on these kind of issues. So I guess it's just depending on the exact issue that kind of they've flagged up, hopefully they have actually told you what it was. It'll be about going through and just double checking, like, have we removed the keywords if that's the problem? Is the tracking setup we have still working? Can the conversions happen or not? There are issues that sometimes can be a little bit invisible. Like if you had too many conversions on your website, that can be flagged up as a problem. Like if your conversion rate was 40%, because you're tracking, like, did they look at a page, then that can be flagged up as a problem, because from Google's point of view, that's not a meaningful conversion. So I think without knowing exactly what the issue here, it's a little bit hard to point to the correct advice, but feel free to reach out to EventsAt and we'll answer that question.
Cool. Can you explain the benchmark or assessment of ad performance that is now required to maintain AdWords grant?
Yeah, so, and hopefully that relates to some of the compliance criteria that I listed later on in the slides. So that was the minimum 5% click-through rate across the account for a rolling 2-month period. That you can't add overly generic keywords or single-word keywords. Single-word keywords, you can do it. You just have to get permission before. So if your organization name is a single-word keyword, well, you want to bid on that, such as a lot of organizations out there. So Leafcutter, for example, we'd want to bid on. But you have to go through an approval process for that first. If you want to add additional websites to your account, you have to get that approved first. So you can do it, but you just have to do a list there. I've worked with some organizations where they had their core website and then another website where, and this was a housing organization, where one website was about kind of purpose and mission, and the second website was like listings of like rental accommodation. And even though there is a charitable purpose there, an organizational purpose and mission, the second website was deemed too commercial because it overlaps quite a lot with commercial purpose. And so we couldn't actually do ads on that second website on ad grants. So yeah, a lot of these kind of these parts come up. There are about 5 or 6 pages on the Google website, and we have that list in the checklist of here's where they outline each of the compliance kind of steps that they're checking for on a rolling basis. So as part of the checklist, if you do want those kind of links, please feel free to email us. We'll send that through. But yeah, so it is those kind of ones, that 5% click through, no generic keywords, maintain that the mission is actually listed on the website. The bid amounts are fixed at $2 if you're manual bidding. They can go over that with automated bidding. And yeah, it's like a couple other kind of criteria in there that are escaping my mind right now.
What is the minimum time commitment per week do you think all this is in terms of optimizing? I know the answer is probably the more the better, but is there a ballpark?
Cool. Okay. No, that's a really good question, because if you're kind of going down this path, like, you have to consider time as well as a factor, because that is an opportunity cost for you. It's not like we all have an abundance of resources in our organization. It's often quite we all have conflicting priorities. So I think for myself, if you don't have anything set up now, it's just like front load some time there. You can get things, like, obviously go through the application process. You can set up and kind of have things rolling. I mean, if you've got the content on your website already, you can have ads rolling in like an hour or a couple hours. And that's kind of after you've done a little bit of research and played around with the interface. If you only have a few hours a week, that's okay. Then make sure you use those few hours a week and add to things as you go. Like, if you're going to not start it because you need to spend like 3 days creating this giant campaigns and doing all this research and creating like hundreds of ads, start small. Just start with like a couple of searches that people might do to your website. Start even just with your brand, like your organization name. Create a brand campaign. Create those couple of different ad groups in there. Create the ads. Get it set up and rolling, and then that's great, because at least you've started. and then it's easier to just add to it as you go along, if time is kind of the biggest constraint. One really great research tool that I always use is with Google Ads. In Google Ads, there's the Ad Planner, Keyword Planner, which helps you research keywords. There's another one called Google Search Console. If you don't have that, validate your website. That is all the information about how people get to your website right now through organic search. And so quite often I'll go through that list of keywords. I'll be like, what keywords are we showing up that our ranking's kind of bad? Like we're kind of down, bottom of page 1, page 2, page 3, wherever it is. It's traffic that's really relevant, but we're just not showing up really high. And then I will put those keywords into the paid inverted commas, into ad grants to see, can I drive more traffic for those keywords? Because that I already know people get to our website through these and they seem relevant. So that can take some of the research and guesswork out of Google Ads. And then it's just, okay, let's just kind of put it in. So yeah, if you can spend, if you have nothing, spend a few hours each kind of week for a period of time. If it's just reporting, you can kind of do that every kind of couple of weeks. It kind of depends how much spend is going kind of through there. But ideally, someone would be looking at it, especially the search terms report. But someone should be looking at it like every kind of couple of weeks. The biggest danger is just you've turned it on, no one's paying attention, no one's monitoring the email address. You get a notification for compliance problems, the account goes deactivated, and no one knows why. And then it's like, I've seen that a couple of times where, and then no, it's just like people are too busy, it's not a priority, it never gets picked up again.
Next question. Our site isn't optimized at the moment. Is it possible to run an ad campaign whilst upgrading the site?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's no restrictions on that. And even like for me, especially in digital marketing, I'm always up for testing stuff and just kind of seeing how it goes. So, I kind of said all these things about like fast and mobile responsive and have great content. And that's like in an ideal world, which we do not live in. So, definitely start and just kind of do it. And so I probably should have made that message more clear. Not having this fantastic kind of content doesn't mean you can't do it at all. It just is not as optimal as it could be. So yeah, totally upgrade your site and do it. One thing to be aware of, if you're changing the links to pages, like if content is on a page and then the URL changes, when that happens, make sure you update your ads because all your ads will deactivate at that time. If Google starts hitting redirects and 404s, it's just going to turn off all the ads. So just kind of make sure when that changeover happens that you update ads and you're kind of ready for that shift.
Next question. How do you know what search terms or phrases people are using?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. It's like, okay, I got to kind of figure this stuff out. And you as the person in your organization that is super close to the cause and the topic in your organization, sometimes it's really hard to kind of think, well, what could it be for people who don't know us or they only know a particular cause or a topic. As I mentioned before, like check the search terms report. Check Google Search Console for like, here's how people find you right now and how they get to your website right now. The most used search terms are going to be brand, 9 times out of 10, because that is, of course, they search your organization and then they find you. But there'll be other ones there that are unbranded. So that's where they could be searching for a topic and they hit your website. You can use other research tools. So there are a bunch of paid tools that are out there. Things like SEMrush, and there are a couple of others that are kind of like that. What I like about a lot of these tools is they have a free trial, or like a 2-week trial, so you can just kind of sign up, pull out a whole bunch of research and data, and then, if you need to use it in 3 months' time, I don't know, register again, or like pay for it like 1 month at a time if you kind of need that, so you don't have this ongoing expense of a tool that you just don't need every month. And then literally just kind of search out there, like if you do a search on Google for like, how do I do keyword research? There are so many write-ups that give guidance on how to do that you'll be able to find a lot of great guides out there that get into as much detail or kind of like a high level if you really want, that will, they'll probably be able to give a much better answer than my 30-second ramble.
Next question. When would a broad match campaign be useful?
Yeah, good. That's really good because it's often my fear running broad match, but that's probably because because I have done both kind of sides. It's where I just see wasted spend if I'm actually spending money. So broad match, it's great, and I do use it. It's really great when I'm researching. So back to the kind of previous question, how do I research? Well, okay, put in a broad match term and see what it picks up. See what these specific searches that people are doing. So you can go in broad with whatever term you have and just see like what's all the extra stuff that Google's going to give me. Now, when I would normally do that, I would normally control my cost, or I'd make sure that that one broad term, and this is more for like a manual CPC, which actually we can't do anymore. So I don't actually have that level of control anymore. So I would monitor that very, very closely. So if you have like one broad term or a few that you put in, I'm using it for keyword research. I'm taking all those keywords. It's giving me ideas for new keywords to put in that might be phrase or getting more specific. And then I might turn off the broad keywords because now I've done that kind of research and I know kind of what's going on. But yeah, it's just kind of that it can be a bit tricky because it can give you so much traffic, it can just eat budget. And again, that's a super concern when I'm actually spending real money, and it can be a concern if I'm running campaigns that if I'm hitting that daily cap.
Google Analytics show what search terms people use to get to your website. Would you suggest using these to develop keywords for a campaign, as these have been generated by searches?
So yeah, in Google Analytics, there's a couple of reports to be aware of. Now, there is what's called the Keywords Report. The Keywords Report is for pretty much everyone, like 95% of the keywords are going to be what's called not provided. The part that's useful is when you register with Google Search Console, you can connect it to Google Analytics, and that will pass the keywords into Google Analytics. So when I kind of talk about Search Console, and this question here is more than likely talking about the Google Search Console keywords, but they're just recorded in Google Analytics, so you only have one interface. Because the normal keyword report in Google Analytics doesn't work anymore for organic search. The other type of keywords you can get in Google Analytics is in the site search, the site search terms. That's actually for internal search on your website. So if I go to a website and I use their search function on their website, I can actually capture whatever those searches were. So yeah, the keywords, if you're looking at Google Analytics, Search Console can be a report in there, because I've connected the two, and then I'm still getting that great list of keywords, and I can see what are people doing when they're coming to the website. So it's definitely a place that I would recommend checking out.
Next question, can you change search terms over time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, not search terms are what people type in. So the keywords is what you have control over. And yeah, absolutely. You can totally change it. Like everything is changeable. So if you see something's not working, or like I want to add to this, or I want to create new groupings or new ads or new keywords, or everything is totally changeable. And that's I guess where the time factor comes in. Like you just have to add that into it's a responsibility or a function of someone's job. Or if you need to outsource that, obviously we can supply support for that. So yeah, it's totally everything in there is changeable, and that's kind of the idea. Like digital marketing, the promise of the benefit is that we've got all these numbers, and so we can improve things over time. So if we're not improving things, we're kind of like it's such a benefit that we're missing that benefit of optimizing as we go if we're not changing things.
Next question, how likely are people to ignore paid ads and jump to the first organic results? Is being associated with advertising ever undesirable for a charity in your own experience?
Good question. I think that Google's been doing a lot of work of trying to make the ads blend in a lot more. I think that's probably fair to say. The little ad badge that appears next to the ads is pretty can be a lot less. It's a lot less obvious than it used to be. It's a lot less obvious than it used to be back in the day where there was like the right column of ads and there was like a different color behind the ads as well. So they do kind of blend in pretty quickly. I think that when, for different searches, people will just kind of use a different behavior. And sometimes a lot of people just click on that first result a lot of, like, sometimes without even really reading it or just double checking, they're just kind of really quick to kind of go there. I guess with the kind of question, I don't really have good kind of research to say point to this report on that. One thing I will kind of say is, like, when I showed that example of intent and where the intent didn't match, so domestic violence support, and there was like the winter appeals campaign ad. That to me is a negative user experience, and that's where I'd be well. I kind of responded to that pretty strongly, but that's because I was looking at it very in depth. I don't know if an actual if the target audience would have responded the same way. So yeah, I might actually look into that to see if we can find more specific data. But the good thing about Google Ads is if they don't click, you don't pay. So if it's not getting results, okay, then we're not actually out of pocket for this, and that applies more when we're actually paying for it. But yeah, let's see if we can find a bit more data.
This is going to be the last question because we're just running out of time. So my nonprofit runs a hospitality offering as a core commercial activity to fund our charitable goals. Does promoting my food business through the grant fall foul of this program?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Pardon me, sorry. And it is a really tricky one because sometimes the website policy and the mission policy in the documents is kind of a bit ambiguous. I think that I mean, if there's not too much time, like, I would go ahead and apply and just kind of see what gets through. I've seen some organizations that clearly do not meet the education, like they're an education institution, but they have ad grants. So sometimes because there's only a tiny team that does the reviews, stuff just gets approved, and later on maybe it gets taken down, but it kind of runs in the meantime. So I would make sure, like, I would check that website policy and the mission policy that Google has. And again, we have that list, those two as links in the checklist. So please feel free to email us about that. I would double check those and make sure that the pages on your website really clearly state, like, how the activity that you do relates back to the mission and the benefit, like whatever the charitable benefit is. But there are cases where Google's like, yeah, it's too commercial or it's too ambiguous what the connection is between this activity and the mission, or the keywords in the mission, and then it just disables the account. So that, yeah, it's definitely something to kind of watch out for.
Okay, thank you, Tim. We do have a lot of questions left to go through, but unfortunately we've run out of time. So what I will do is I will send your questions through to Tim and his team, and they will answer these questions offline. So please just expect to be contacted directly with a answer to your question. So I do apologize to those who have questions that have not been answered, but we will get to them. So thank you so much, Tim, for presenting today, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you've all learned a lot from this presentation. If you do have any other questions that come to mind or any feedback about the webinar, please send that through to me at events@connectingup.org and we can assist you offline. You can also contact Tim and his team directly via the information on your screen. Don't forget that the recording will be available on our website very shortly and a link will be sent to you, so keep an eye out on your inbox. Again, thank you for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, MJ. Thanks, everyone.